Hi, good evening, and welcome to Living Waters, falling deeper in love with God's Word. And I am having trouble streaming to one of my sites, so I'm sorry I was a little distracted with that. But thank you for joining us. Shabbat Shalom. I'm Lauren.
I wonder why it's not. Yes, I'm sorry. I got distracted.
Yeah, we're a little sidetracked with everything going on over here.
Yeah, I was like, why isn't it there? And I'm Stephanie Pavlantos. Thank you for joining us in Shabbat Shalom.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, that kind of sucks. But yes, we're not seeing. It says that we're streaming.
It says it's not on Lamb, and it's not. We're having trouble streaming. It says to Twitch, so I guess that's not a problem. But then also on looks like the stream was deleted on Facebook. So I don't know. I don't know what to do. Go live, I guess, maybe.
Oops, there we go.
Yeah. Is it working? I don't know. Okay.
I guess we just, I'm not sure. It looks like it's streaming on my YouTube channel. So, yep, sorry, folks. We just had a little technical problem because as soon as it goes live and the introduction starts, that's when we can actually see that we're live everywhere else, but it's not. So
right. Yeah, I think it's not. I don't think it's working on my author page. So we might have to tweak that after the show and see if we can get the connections working again. But anyway, thanks for joining us. We'll figure it out, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll get the comments we usually get and the folks that usually join us. I'm
going to see if I can share it from YouTube onto my channel, right? At least on my Facebook page.
Yeah, it might take a few seconds to get things caught up.
There we go.
Yeah.
So, but it's posting, so we'll see if anybody logs on.
We'll see if we can jump on and figure it out. Sorry about that.
It is on Discovering Our Hebrew Roots Facebook page if you want to go there and catch it.
Yeah, I'm still not seeing it sharing on mine, so I don't know. We'll have to jump on and I don't know how to get it to I don't know how to get it to reconnect. So, okay. Anyway, welcome. Here we are. We are continuing. We're almost done with the book of Luke. We are continuing through we have only got a few more chapters. We're doing 21
and 22, and then we just have 2 more, so 1 more week of this.
Yeah, and I know, Stephanie, we've talked about having a guest. Have we booked anybody for the next?
Did you book Terry?
I did not. I didn't reach out to her. I guess we need to book Terry. I guess I'll reach out to her.
Yeah,
I know you had her on your podcast recently.
This week, yes, yeah. Wednesday, she was on my podcast. She's always a great guest. She loves to talk about the same things that we love to talk about. So
I know. Okay, I'll reach out to her.
She has a book on the temple, and she goes through and explains the significance of everything in the temple, even the hooks and the rings. It's very good. So,
all right. As soon as we get off today, I'll reach out to her and see if she might be available. And I'll have to get that date from you again. I know you told it to me already.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. All right. And then are we going to do 2 guests back to back?
So yes, so 2 guests back to back. Mm-hmm. So the in 3 weeks we'll have Angie Sickler, and she's going to get us started on her book, and then and she might even show up while we're doing her book. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So the Father's Love Language.
That's right.
It's a easy read. It's not complicated at all. But she does a great job at explaining different words and letters, and even the letters that are in the constellations, and and what they have to do with the feasts. So it'll be good.
That's right. That's
but
right.
We are in Luke 21 and 22, and so when we got on, she's like, "Oh, I have nothing for this," and like, "Oh no, I've got stuff.
I'm glad. It's not that I have nothing for this. It's just I don't know. We're in the thick of things that are very well known.
Yes.
This is a very common, well read, often read, and
and different verses that are quoted, and
and I will say he doesn't have a ton of detailed footnote, nothing new. There's not a lot of new information here. So, we're talking about Yeshua starts off by observing treasure offerings in the temple.
Mm-hmm.
This is where he begins by saying that the widow is giving out of,
Her, yeah.
Out of giving everything that she has, and the rich men and the Pharisees are giving out of their excess, and so he's just saying that she's giving out of giving more, basically.
Because it was out of sacrifice.
Yeah, sacrifice.
And when we just give out of our extra, it's not a sacrifice for the Lord. And so he was taking note, because this woman was giving it was truly sacrificial. And of course he's on his, so to speak, he's on his way to be the sacrifice, this lamb. And so, that's heavily in his mind, I would imagine, about sacrifice and what it looks like in people to sacrifice for others. And or to sacrifice, I should say, even to God. So
so right after that, he and then while they were speaking about the temple, and he begins to talk about how none of the stones will be spared. A day will come when not one stone will be spared, not one will be standing upon the other. And they ask him, "Teacher, when will these things be? And what will be the signs of these things that will happen?" And he basically goes through, the whole chapter is in red, so it's all his words. And he goes through, things to look for. And he repeats, do not fear. You will hear wars, and we hear the common verse, rumors of wars, but he says wars and revolutions. Do not fear, for they're necessary. Things are going to happen. Nations will rise up. There'll be nations and kingdoms against kingdoms. Terrors and fears and great signs will be seen in the heavens. He actually says that 2 times. There'll be signs in the heavens of things that will happen. I don't want to read through the whole thing, but he definitely goes through Jerusalem will be surrounded. Those that are in Judea will flee to the hills. Hope that it's not in the wintertime. And then those that are pregnant will have a hard time as well. And he just really goes through, there'll be earthquakes and great shakings. And he just really goes through the process. And then we'll see the Son of Man will come in the clouds with much heavenly power, great glory. And when these things begin to happen, have courage, lift up your heads, because your redemption, or the word salvation, draws near. And then he begins to speak a parable to them about the fig tree. So I didn't know if you had, before we get into the fig tree aspect, was there anything in there that you wanted to add?
So when we were doing this book a little while ago, we went through all the different feasts. And we were talking about the second Exodus, which I don't think that most of us realize there is a second Exodus.
Right.
And what he is saying here, right where in 22 that he starts off with, and woe to those, in 23, there will be great distress and wrath upon this people, and they will be led away captive to every land. Right. And then like you said, the Jerusalem will be trampled. But that part, led away to every land, is significant because, and of course, Revelation gives us more information that he sends them into the wilderness, and then the earth, the earth, like Satan comes after them, and the earth kind of helps them by coming between. It's you can call it metaphor, you can call it whatever you want, but basically, the Lord puts things in motion to protect his people, Israel, when they are sent to the wilderness and other lands. But it's interesting because this book then quotes a few different chapters, a few different books. So first in Isaiah 19. So you just read that they will see the Son of Man who will come in the clouds with much heavenly power and great glory. Mm-hmm. And Isaiah 19 says, behold, the Lord is riding on a swift cloud and is about to come to Egypt. The idols of Egypt will tremble at his presence, and the heart of the Egyptians will melt within them. And if you keep reading that, it's like what he's going to do to Egypt. Now, he's on a cloud, so we're talking about the same time, the future, right?
Right.
And so we have this, and I think this is the exact same day. They see him coming on a cloud there. Here he is on a cloud. And then in Numbers 24, it says, God brings him, and in brackets, the seed of the king of Israel, out of Egypt. He is, for him, and him is capitalized, like the horns of the wild ox. He will devour the nations who are his adversaries, and will crush their bones in pieces and shatter them with arrows. And we kind of see that now. This is the Lord. This is Yeshua, the Messiah. But we see like he's coming with arrows, and I think we forget. Like I did. I actually forgot all that time that arrows are mentioned, with him holding arrows and shooting arrows at people. You know, in Revelation, we think of the sword of the Spirit and that kind of thing, and out of his mouth will come a great sword. But he's also kind of going after people with arrows and that kind of thing. But and then just one more here, because there's several. But I think I have like all these different things marked. Yeah, so it tells us that basically I wish I could remember, but that the Red Sea will be dried up. Mm-hmm. And it must be in Isaiah again. But basically the concept of the Lord splitting the Red Sea yet again, specifically in the context of the final redemption of Israel, is actually a theme that pops up multiple times throughout the prophets. All things considered, the view that Jesus will return to Egypt and retrace the entirety of the Exodus route enjoys some significant scriptural support. Mm-hmm. And that's what he kind of does in this book. So if you didn't follow along with us in this book, I encourage you to go back and look, because he really talks about the second Exodus, and all these scriptures almost that he mentioned starts out in that day, mm-hmm. which is always relating to the future day of his return. So. Right. And it's interesting because as we go on and here, why does he tell a parable about the fig tree? And this it's like it all came together. It was kind of like I had one of those, oh, cool. So so the fig tree is a metaphor for Israel, which you probably knew. Mm-hmm. It's symbolic of Israel. It's often symbolized the health of the nation, both spiritually and physically.
We talked a little bit about this last week.
Yeah, and you think of the time that Jesus cursed that fig tree because there was no fruit. He was actually showing that there was no fruit in Israel. There was no fruit from their relationship with the Lord. They weren't bearing fruit. That's what it was. And so he cursed the tree, and he was basically cursing Israel because they weren't bearing fruit. So you see then when you realize all of that how this kind of comes together. So and so what is he kind of saying here? And I can keep going about some of this, but even the here's one, let me see. The symbolism, it says about the parable in Luke, it says, look at the fig tree and the trees. So what is he talking about? He says, here the fig tree is a sign of the approaching kingdom of God, urging believers to be vigilant and prepared for the fulfillment of God's promises. But what I realized when I was putting this kind of stuff together, who do we look for to see the signs? We have to look at Israel. Because he's like, but when these things begin to happen, have courage and look up your heads because your redemption draws near. And he says, look at the fig tree. And those words, I think, are literal. Look at Israel. Look and see what's going on in Israel, because then you'll know the prophetic calendar is on its way. It's coming to fulfillment. And I just kind of, I don't know, I thought that was really cool. So it all has to do, we need to look to Israel to see what's happening there, to know what's going to go on.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. And a lot's going on in Israel.
Yeah. But I had all this kind of highlighted, and I even back in verse 16, even your parents and your brothers and your relatives and your friends will betray you, and then they will kill some of you. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you think about words like that, and you will be hated by all men because of my name.
Right.
I mean, this is like starting. This is starting in some countries. And
it is. And
even like our own president just put some protection against, right? What was it with some kind of, I forget what it's called, about a Christian protection from being, I forget what it was called, but yeah, basically it was to protect Christians. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to, you said that, and, you know, even, I mean, I don't want to politicize anything, but even like my family is like, there are Christians in my family, mm-hmm. but there's different beliefs. And so I have a certain faith, but other family members believe very differently, and there's conflict because of it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I wouldn't say we hate each other because of it, but we definitely don't agree. We're not in agreement on how things are handled. Yeah. And so, you know, even there, you can see some of this happening. So, mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and even in the whole Torah movement, mm-hmm. I mean, you know, I hear people talking against like Messianics, and they are trying to be Torah observant themselves, but yet they're putting down the Messianic Jews or the Messianic people, even what you might call Messianic Christian, Messianic Christians or Gentiles, if you want. Even though we're not Gentiles, we're Israel. We're all mm-hmm. part of Israel, and we are, because we're grafted in. And I think it's important, but that we, like, you see so much division in different ways. And I mean, I listen to people, and I really try to hear their side of what they think. But I mean, there are people out there who do not believe that Yeshua is God, that he was like, you call that the agency, like he stood in his place. He was an agent of mm-hmm. God. And yeah, I mean, I know the verses that start popping to your mind, and he says, and the one that always pops up for me is, I and the Father are one.
One. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, how can we explain that away? And things like we've talked about, you know, how many times did Jesus allow people to fall at his feet mm-hmm. and worship him?
Yeah. I want to read a footnote. I want to read a footnote here, because you keep saying we are Israel, and we are grafted in. And so I want to read this footnote, because there's a note here. It says, truly I say to you, this tribe will not pass away until these things occur. And the footnote that Gabriel is making here is, he's saying like these people, you know,
True. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people will say that the people of that time were expecting to see it happen. Mm-hmm. But I want to read it. It says here, Yeshua is referring not to those who are alive in his day, but to all believers, Jews and Gentiles, who join to him and observe Torah. Mm. It is the Israel of Elohim, the household of faith,
wow.
who is the tribe.
Yeah, that's good.
That would not pass away, but bear witness until the end times. It's easy to understand how early believers could misinterpret this and apply it to their own times.
Yeah, and that comes from Luke 21:31.
Yeah.
When you see these things happening, know that the kingdom of Elohim is near. Truly, I say to you that this tribe will not pass away. And that's what you're referring to. This tribe.
Well, and it's translated, this generation will not pass. I mean, it's said, and I've heard others say, well, that, the people of that time. No, it's the household of faith, the kingdom of, the household of the Israel of Elohim. And I think that's the way it should be described. Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah. I missed that in here on the notes, the footnotes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was kind of getting all excited about the whole fig tree thing and the second Exodus, but but even like the whole difference between, let me just tell you this, because I also looked up about the olive tree. And it says that the olive tree, it's just, you can think of peace, right? Yeah. It's a symbolic of peace. And he kind of goes in, it's also about prosperity and divine blessing. But here's what they say, and I'm on BibleHub.com. If you haven't used that site, I really encourage you to use that site. The olive tree also carries eschatological significance, particularly in the context of Mount of Olives. This location, rich with olive trees, is where Jesus delivered the Olivet Discourse, a prophetic teaching on the end times. Furthermore, the Mount of Olives is a site of Jesus' ascension and is prophesied to be the place of his return.
Right.
So it's intertwined with the hope of Yeshua's second coming and the fulfillment of God's kingdom. So you have like he mentions both, not in the same scripture part, but basically the olive tree has a lot of symbolism. Symbolism. And then the fig tree kind of tells us, look at Israel to see what's going on in the world, to see the prophecy.
It's here. So he's talking about the fig tree, and then it says in verse 37, it says, during the day he would teach at the temple, during the night he would go out and stay on the mountainside. That is
the place
called the place of olives, or the Mount of Olives.
So
both are mentioned in this section.
Yeah, you're right, it is. And I knew I saw it somewhere, but yeah. But yeah, so they both have significance because they're also called like the olive, like even back in Zechariah, two olive like branches and olive trees are mentioned, and one is the kingdom of Judah or the house of Judah, and one's the house of Israel. And it's very interesting because there's verses where they are specifically called, like in Jeremiah, that they are specifically called the olive tree, the green olive tree. Yeah. So because he says, I'm referring to you as an olive tree, basically, then we have to look at every time it's mentioned, where is that going? What is he really talking about? Maybe a bigger, another layer, I guess. So as in your speak, it's another layer.
Yeah, another layer. Oh, all right. Anything else in 21? I don't want to go too fast.
No, I know. No, I have this starred. Heaven and earth will pass away. And I think you read it, but my words will never pass away. And I remember someone saying, this is about Jesus. And we have to understand that this isn't about Jesus. He's the word, but this is plural. It's his words will never pass away.
Yeah.
And that's Torah. That's everything.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away.
Right.
And we have to take that seriously.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So that's all I had there. And then we start in 22 with the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or our Bibles might say Passover, but Passover was the dinner that happened before the very night before the Feast of Unleavened Bread officially began.
Yeah. I didn't compare the one. Let me see if I can. I'm going to pull up 22 real quick. It does say the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is now called Passover, was approaching. And he's got it same here. Now the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is called Passover.
Okay.
So yeah.
He puts Pascha or what is it? How is it pronounced in Hebrew? Passover.
Pesach.
Thank you.
Yeah,
sorry, I knew I was putting the wrong syllable accent somewhere.
Pesach. He says Passover. He's got Passover in his. Does he have? Do you have Pesach in
Mm-hmm.
yours?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting. I've got Passover in mine. Interesting.
How funny.
Yeah.
And but yeah, so this was interesting because this is where, and you want to talk about Judah, so I'm going to give the floor
A little
to you.
bit. Yeah. He so in my version, and so she and I have just a tiny bit, little tiny differences. We've got a few different footnotes that are different. For the most part it's the same, but this is starting Luke 22. And the chief priests and scribes were seeking how they might kill him. They were afraid of the people. And it says, then Satan entered Judas, who was called the Sicarii, which is the I want to say he's called the dagger. I'm going to read a footnote about him. His name is not Judas Iscariot. We're always told his name is Judas Iscariot, but it's Judas the Ha, which is the word Ha, Scari, Iscari. So
Yeah.
I'll read the footnote about that. Who was from the number of the 12, and he went and he spoke with the priests and the scribes and the chief guards, and how he might deliver them to them. So we know that Judas was the traitor, but he was a traitor because for a few different reasons. He was a zealot. So Judas the zealot. Scari is Iscariot means zealot. And so it's Judas the zealot. That's what his name means.
Mm-hmm.
And he turned Jesus over because he did believe that Jesus was the Messiah. And he believed by turning him over that he would be declared Messiah by the Jews, by the Pharisees. But they never did that. And so he believed he was being and then when he realized that wasn't happening, he realized he was being a pawn of Satan, and that's why he killed himself, why he committed suicide.
Yeah. And we have to remember there were a few zealots within the disciples, and
so,
even John the Baptist was a bit of a zealot.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
I'm going to read it to you. Yeah. If you do watch The Chosen, I mean, they even have one of the, I don't even know his name, but they have one.
Judah the Zealot, isn't it? And then one's Judas the Zealot and Judas Iscariot. So they named them differently, but I think they're the same first name.
I don't know.
But I could be wrong.
Could be
I'll
wrong.
look it up as we're talking. Go ahead.
Okay, so here's the footnote on Judas, and this is actually his footnotes told us to go back to Matthew because Matthew is the parallel event for this, and so it says this is an important detail that sometimes is overlooked. Judas is not sorry that he handed Messiah over, but that in doing so, it got him condemned. Okay. This is because Iscariot is really Sicarii. It translates as zealot, and it refers to the kind of daggers that the group used to kill the Roman soldiers. It very well may be the case that Judas expected the Sanhedrin to declare Yeshua the Messiah, and therefore begin the long-awaited cosmic showdown between the Hebrews and the sons of darkness, also known as the Kittim, and the Hebrew term for the Romans. Like, he expected them to declare that Jesus the Messiah and start the showdown between the Hebrews and Rome, right? Because they hated Rome.
And it was Simon the Zealot. Sorry,
there were Simon the Zealot. Right. It was Simon, right? So in the Chosen, it's got Simon. He's always got the daggers. He's got
and he's always practicing the fighting.
Exactly. Okay, but so Judas was also a zealot. Okay, so that is also why Judas did not hand his teacher over to the Romans directly, for they were the ultimate abomination to him. However, when it became clear that the Sanhedrin were merely Roman puppets and not going to stand up for their own people, that's the moment Judas probably realized that he'd been a pawn for Satan, and he promptly returned the money and commits suicide. So incidentally, 30 pieces of silver was the price the Torah gave for a faithful servant who becomes injured. So everybody says, like, Judas betrayed Jesus, and he wasn't a believer, and he turned over Jesus. I think it's wrong. I think he believed Jesus was Messiah. He turned Jesus over to get the ball rolling on this revolt against Rome, but the Jews didn't do it. They didn't believe he was Messiah. So I think that's an interesting footnote. I thought that was neat.
Yeah. That's really cool. Because Matthew actually goes into more detail, because that's what, if you go back to Matthew 27, it goes into a little more detail about, because you actually have here, there's a note that says Judah, the traitor. That's what he became known as, right?
Yeah.
And traitor as Traitor. So not trader, like trading.
Yeah. Traitor instead of traitor. Yeah. Matthew had a lot more. Matthew's got a lot more of the footnotes and stuff. I think they're very interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting because you don't realize, you think that he's really just a bad guy. Like, how did he not know he was the Messiah? But he was really trying to get a revolution started. Like, that's what he wanted to get started. He wanted people to rise up and fight with the Messiah against Rome. And he was hoping to get this big revolt started, I think.
He did believe he was Messiah. And everybody's like, nobody really addresses, why did he kill himself? Did he do, what did he feel sorry for? He felt sorry for turning over Messiah. He felt sorry that, they didn't, the revolt never happened, and he killed his Messiah, and he was being used by Satan. He realized he was being a pawn, a lot. I've heard pastors say, Judas wasn't saved. Judas wasn't a believer. Judas wasn't, Judas went to hell. And I'm like, I don't, according to this, I don't know. I don't think so. I think
it says, like in the notes, it actually says that he repented, because that's why he gave back the money, and he was sorry. But I think that he couldn't live with himself. And I mean, I don't think, I know, like in the Catholic Church, like if you commit suicide, it's you're like it's the unforgivable sin. But I don't know. It's not up to me. What happens to people who commit suicide? But I do think that there's grace. If it needs to be there, the Lord will give them grace for it.
Right.
But so that's all in Matthew. So it's interesting too. This kind of just, people often think like Matthew is first in the Gospels because they think that Matthew was written first, but there's actually more evidence that Luke was written first, and that's why we see Matthew and Mark kind of take some of Luke's stuff. But I know that most seminaries don't teach that. They teach that basically Luke took information from Matthew and Mark. But it's just that what they choose to go into detail about. So
I was told in seminary Mark was written first.
Okay.
Yeah. Mark.
Yeah, I've heard Matthew because that's why it's first, and then but but just think, I mean, how we'd say Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That would just totally like mess us up saying the books.
Okay. Then let's see. So after that, the day of the
verse 7 and 8.
Yeah, the day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread arrived.
Oh, sorry, dogs are howling.
During which the crowds, they get away from the crowds, and the day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread arrived. There was a custom that the Passover lamb would be slaughtered, and Yeshua sent Peter and John, and he said, "Go prepare the Passover lamb that we may eat." And they enter into the city. You'll meet a man who is carrying a water jar. We've talked about this before, being an Essene, because he is he's following cleansing
monks.
Yeah, basically that's a good way to say it. They followed cleanliness rules. He would have been carrying a water jar.
And they didn't marry, so they were That's why they carried their own water, because
Right.
the job of women.
So follow him to the house where I may eat the Passover lamb with my disciples, and behold, I'll show you a certain large upper room that is furnished and prepared. So they went and they found the man, and he prepared the Passover lamb. And when the time arrived, Yeshua came, reclined with the 12 with the apostles, and he said to them, I have greatly desired that I will eat this Passover lamb with you before I suffer. And then I say to you that from now on, I will not eat until it is fully accomplished in the kingdom of Elohim. Mm-hmm. And then he's got a note here. Verse 17, verse 18 is non-existent in the Aramaic majority text. And then he took the bread, gave thanks, broke it, gave it to them. This is my body, which for your sake is given. Do this in remembrance of me. Likewise, concerning the cup, after they had eaten supper, this is the cup of the renewed covenant in my blood. We've got a really good footnote on that one.
Yeah, you got to go back to that, huh?
Which is shed for your sake. But behold, the hand of my betrayer is upon the table, and the Son of Man goes as it was determined. But woe to the man whose hand he is betrayed. Now I can stop there because Matthew's got some other details that Luke does not have.
Yep. Matthew 26-28, right? You're going to go back there?
Yes.
And I'll be in 26 too, because there's a lot going on in 26. And again, even starting with Matthew 24, most of this is all about the kingdom of heaven. It's right. The future of what to expect. So are you in 28 or
I am in Matthew 26. What verse are you 26, 28? Matthew 26. I am on Matthew 26. 28. This is my blood of the renewed covenant. You want to start there?
Yeah.
Okay. So Andrew uses the word renewed covenant. And I know in a lot of the other Bibles, it says the new covenant. And he actually gives us verses of Psalms 103:5. So it's the same word. Mm-hmm. It is the word. I wrote it down. I actually did a little bit of a word study on it. It's the word chadash. It's a
and actually, both in Aramaic and Hebrew, it actually means renewed
or repair. It's renew or repair. It's a het, a dalet, and a shin, and it's translated as renewed or repaired. And he gives us two verses, Psalms 103:5, and it's actually the word renewed in that passage, and then in Jeremiah 31 through 34, in that section, it's renewed as well. Mm-hmm. So only in this section, it's translated as new. So,
yeah. And it's interesting because, again, when we were talking about this beforehand, mm-hmm. It's renewed, kind of like the we think of the moon, the new moon. We call it new moon, which is a misnomer because we're not getting a new moon. We're just getting a new cycle, but it's a renewed moon. Same moon, mm-hmm. just a new cycle. Mm-hmm. And it's the same way with the renewed covenant. What covenant are they renewing?
Right.
What covenant is Jesus renewing? He's renewing the covenant with Abraham.
Right.
That's what's being renewed because at this point, they've been living under the Mosaic covenant. And Jesus says, so now with me, we're going to live like it's basically an oh my goodness, the term slipped my mind, but basically unconditional love mm-hmm. that the Lord had for Abraham and grace. And that's what the renewed covenant is. But but Galatians tells us that a covenant, one covenant doesn't, like the Abrahamic covenant came before the Mosaic covenant, mm-hmm. but the Mosaic covenant doesn't like renege or dispose of the Abrahamic covenant.
Right. None of them are voided. They're renewed.
So none of them are voided just because one. So if you think of the renewed covenant as coming after the Mosaic covenant, which is in Jeremiah 31, but it doesn't do away with the covenant before it. And so that's the one thing that we have to really go when we're reading, is put all the pieces together in like Galatians and Luke and Jeremiah 31 and all of that. But it's it's called a royal grant covenant. And it's about, basically, it's the same covenant that he made with Abraham.
Right.
So, yeah, because they weren't living under that covenant since they had the Mosaic covenant. But I think it's interesting, and it's really worth the deep dive into all the covenants and what they mean.
Yeah, we've done that before. We've done different book studies where we've checked out different aspects of covenant, different types
of Epic of Eden, right? We went through all the covenants.
And
so
I've always
another good book.
Yeah, and I always challenge people, show me an example of a covenant that was canceled in the Bible. Like there aren't any. And I love when Steffi uses that example of the moon, because we call it a new moon, but it's not. It's a new cycle. It's a I don't want to say repaired, because it's not, but it waxes and wanes. Yeah, it's the same moon. So I think that's important. And the reason I mention Psalms, some people will say, well, that's an Old Testament text. Well, you have to remember, I know we're reading the New Testament and everybody wants to jump straight to the Greek, but that's not the original language. That's a translated language from Aramaic and Hebrew.
Yeah. So and the cool thing about the BibleHub.com is, no matter if you're in the Greek or the Hebrew, it gives you the word in the other language that corresponds with it. So if you're in Psalms and you're talking about a Hebrew word, it gives you the corresponding Greek word. And I love that, because now you can compare them, like, oh, they're talking about the same thing here. This, because you have to understand, these people were all Jewish people. They all thought in Hebrew or Aramaic, most likely, but they read, all the scrolls were in Hebrew. So when they're quoting from the old Hebrew, the ancient Hebrew that the scrolls were written in. So it's really good to put those words together and see, oh, this Greek word goes back to this, because there's lots of examples of
so faith. The word faith is pistis in Greek. It's amen in Hebrew.
Yeah.
So I mean,
same letters. It's equal. Same exact letters. It's very interesting. Like even lawlessness. When we have the man of lawlessness, he even called the scribes and the Pharisees lawlessness. They were people of lawlessness. Well, he actually wasn't. They were people of the law, so they weren't against the law. But when you look at the Hebrew and then the Greek counterpart is lawlessness. But in the Hebrew, it's the words for transgression and iniquity. So they're the same word. He's talking about people who are rebellious and perverted and full of iniquity, because that's actually, iniquity means like a perversion. And so it's really interesting to do those word studies. And I know we're nerds that way.
It's fun. I got another word nerd in a minute here. It's going to get fun in a second too.
I kind of lost my place in let me get back to.
So let's see. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about the cups?
Yeah. Did you want? Well, the rooster comes first.
Okay. All right. So.
And then sift you like wheat. We should go back to that. So we hadn't even talked about that.
So let's see. We're going to read from Luke, or are we going to read from?
Well, start in Luke 22. It says 31.
Okay.
Simon, behold, Satan wants to sift, and this one says, sift all of you like wheat.
Yeah.
But I
that was important.
You.
Yeah. So Yeshua said to Simon, behold, Satan wants to sift all of you, which I think is important, all of you, because he's speaking to, we always think he's always saying it directly to Simon. Simon, you're going to get sifted. but the language says all of the disciples are going to be sifted like wheat. So all of you are going to be sifted. And, but I have prayed over you that your faith may not be weakened. Also, in the time you will return to be strengthened. And then he is speaking to Simon directly. Simon said, Master, my master, with you I am prepared even for prison or for death. And Yeshua said, I say to you, Simon, so we've talked about this before, and this is my drum that I beat on. That Simon, I say to you, Simon, that the rooster will not crow this day until you insist 3 times that you do not know me. And we've heard it. The other word that for rooster is the temple crier.
Yeah, and you have to go back to Matthew.
Got to go back to Matthew. And we've talked about this before. That page 87. So chickens were outlawed in the city in Jerusalem because they would walk through things and make them dirty. So it's not a rooster like what we're thinking, but they were called temple criers. And the temple crier was the person that would call people to prayer. It would announce when the morning, the one who opened the temple it would call 2 or 3 times to announce the morning services. That was called the temple crier, or they called him the rooster. His name was the rooster.
Because he crowed.
Because he would crow that the temple's open. Yeah. So, and he's basically calling the time, the time of day and the timekeeper, that kind of thing. So he's basically saying, it's not that the rooster was crowing, but that, you're gonna deny me by the time the temple opens in the morning. So that's the reference to what's happening with Simon. And so, yes, it happens. It did happen. And then let's see.
And then we get into 41. So, or 40. And this is when they're going to Gethsemane to pray.
Yeah. And he says he reached a place and he says, pray that you may not enter into temptation. He departed from them at about a stone's throw. He knelt, he was praying. He said, Father, if you desire it, let this cup pass from me. Not my will, but your will be done. And a messenger appeared to him, an angel from heaven, to strengthen him. And while being in fear, he was praying earnestly. Sweat became like drops of blood. They fell upon the ground, and he arose from prayer, came to his disciples, and found them sleeping from grief. And he said to them, why are you sleeping? Arise and pray that you may not enter into temptation. So in Luke, it's just one time. It just happens one time. And
Matthew.
Got to go back to Matthew.
Yeah, Matthew 26. And this, it actually talks about that. So you have to keep in mind here that what she was reading in Matthew 26:28, this is the blood of the renewed covenant for which the sake of many I have shed for the forgiveness of sin. So they've just done Passover.
Right.
And so now he gets into Gethsemane,
right,
and he basically says 3 times about the cup. So, and that probably, it starts there in 42. My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to pass over unless I drink it, your will be done. And he comes again and finds that they were sleeping. So maybe I missed one. Did I miss one? Oh yeah. So the first one starts in 39. So again, Matthew 26:39. That's the first time. Is it possible? Let this cup pass over me. Yeah. And then he goes back and prays. And then in 42, he says it again. Yes. And then he says it 3 times. And I guess I'm not did I miss it? Get another one. So that's the second one in 42. Yeah, it says that in 42. And it says so then in 44, he left them and went away again and prayed for the 3rd time. Mm-hmm. And he said the same words. Right. So now he's telling us in Matthew that he actually went and prayed the same prayer 3 times.
3 times.
And so I had learned that basically where he drank the 3 cups and he held the 4th cup, which is the kingdom. He would not drink that 4th cup with them until he was in the kingdom with them. And it was kind of like a bridal thing.
Right.
We talked a lot about covenant before, and it goes back to that 4th covenant that he only drinks with the bride, that 4th cup. But in Passover, the 1st cup was the cup of sanctification. I have the notes here. So the sanctification, if we go back to the high priest wore a crown, a holy crown, and it would say on the forehead, "Holy unto the Lord." And that was a crown that showed they were consecrated to God, to Yah, the Almighty. And so this woman that I was reading from, said that the 1st cup was the crown of thorns, because that was, the priest wore the crown, which was called the Holy Crown. And so now we know that he's going to be our high priest. So what does he have to do? He has to wear a type of crown. And that's the 1st cup, the cup of sanctification. The next cup is the cup of wrath, or I think it's the cup of deliverance. But in his, it has to be the cup of wrath and crushing, which comes from Isaiah. And this is the whipping, the beating, and the torture he endured. So each time, if you remember, he tells them, you are not able to drink from the cup. He's shared that with them. I think with Peter, you are not able to drink the cup I have to drink. And then the 3rd cup is the cup of redemption, and that was the cross. So he's actually asking, Father, can this crown of thorns, can this pass from me? Can this torture, this beating, this pulling of my beard out, can this cup pass from me? And then the 3rd, can this cross, can this cup pass from me? And yet he still is looking forward to that 4th cup that he's going to have with us. And I thought that was so cool, because even though Luke just mentions it once, again, it's knowing that in Scripture, it was actually mentioned 3 times, and it is about an actual, the wrath that he has to go through, all the stuff that is going to come upon him.
Right.
So it's, and I saw on TikTok the other night, somebody was like, this just hit me. Like, they were eating the Passover with the Passover lamb. And that kind of choked me up a little bit, because when that hit her, she was sharing and she's crying. They're eating Passover with the Passover lamb. And I was like, oh, that's I never thought about it that way, but it is. That's what he was doing. So, and that's another reason why he ate it the day before. So he was eating Passover early with the Essenes, because they were on a slightly different day of the week that they believed Passover should be taken or served. And so that kind of puts the calendar off a little bit. Actually, the week that we think of Passion Week. So, but I thought this was good about the 3 cups.
Yeah. So I hadn't heard that before. I think
she was on my podcast, and I thought it was so good, and it was actually from season 2. And I actually named it "Take This Cup From Me."
That's great.
And we talked about that, and it goes back even to Exodus. Like, there's a verse in, and I want to say Exodus 12, but early in Exodus, when they take the Passover meal together, that he tells them 4 I wills, like what I'm going to do, and they correspond those with the 4 cups.
I had never hadn't seen that link before then. So there's so many layers, Stephanie. There's so many layers. We miss so much.
We do.
All right. Well,
I have a friend that still brings up the whole rooster thing. She goes, I know that has nothing to do with our salvation. And she goes, it has nothing to do with me growing in the Lord. Yeah. But she goes, when you told me about that the rooster was not a rooster.
Not a rooster.
She goes, I'm like, what else don't I know? What else do I know?
There's a lot we don't know. Which is so great. That's why I love this Bible. That's why I'm really enjoying this. And I said this to Stephanie, and I know we got to go in a few minutes. There's nothing that's so blatantly like, I mean, there's no theological change, nothing is so new in this, but it's just these little things. And I think they're important, and I think it makes it meaningful and and oh my goodness, that makes so much better sense. And it is a Jewish flavor that would totally make some sense in this.
And even when he tells Peter, when he makes up to Peter after his resurrection, and he says, "Feed my sheep," it's in here as "Feed my lambs, feed my female sheep, feed my male sheep." He didn't just say "feed my sheep" 3 times.
Yeah.
I mean, and those are just little details, but it's like he was telling him, "Feed my children, feed the women, feed the men."
Yeah. Feed the flock.
Yeah. Feed all of them. It's not just about, it's about the men. So,
it's not the men. And there's so much more, but
all right. How he translates those verses in Timothy and all of that about what Paul was talking about women. I mean, he translates them differently from the Aramaic.
He does. So, all right. We have 2 more chapters. Next week, we are going to do 23 and 24. And we'll finally be done with Luke. We thought we would do it all in December. We were crazy.
You were crazy. I go, that's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. I do want to do another book, though. I love using this Bible and going through it.
I know.
And I really do enjoy it. So, all right. Join us next week, and thank you. Shabbat Shalom. You guys have a blessed weekend. And
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. I'm going to pull us out. Thank you, guys. If you missed today's show and want to watch it again, or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you will find this show and all of the other live Lamb show archives on the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the lambnetwork.tv website. I'm Stephanie Pavlantos, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.